Good evening. See that? From the announcements to the lesson, it got to the nighttime for you. So here we go. It's no longer morning. We're ready to go, right? All right. Satan and Satanism. That's what we've been looking at so far with our lesson. And just a small little recap, and then I believe we will probably finish up this portion. And then, as I said, we'll then go into looking at what the Bible says about angels. And then from that point on, going into the idea of really what it means to really put on the full armor of God. Spiritual warfare. What does that mean for us in our lives? So, what we've already gone over the last couple of weeks was, well, first off, who is Satan? Can someone give me an answer to that one? What did we come up with? Fallen angel. We believe he's a fallen angel. We don't know if that was his exact... We know the angels fell with him. He probably was. He was an angelic being for sure. He was created by God. Where did Satan come from? I kind of gave that one. He was created by God. That's where his beginning came from. Then we talked about last week, this is kind of where we started last week, was how did Satan become evil? And, really, from what we see in the Bible, first off, people will say, well, I don't know how a God that's so good or a God that's love could create evil. He didn't create evil. God's the opposite of evil. But when he created us, when he created the angels, they have the opportunity to choose their own will. And it sure seems to me from the scriptures that I've looked at that it kind of seems like almost like a power grab type of thing. Like Satan wanted what God had. And unfortunately, somehow, was able to convince himself that the powers that he had, that God had given him, could even match with God. But that's what it seems to be in the scriptures, that it was more of a, he wasn't being humble the way that he should, looking at God the way that he should. Now, the last thing we talked about last week was we talked about how powerful Satan is. And really, we stopped, and I think the conclusion really, at least in my mind was, and hopefully we were all on the same page, but the conclusion is that he's really not powerful at all when compared to God. Now, when we let him into our lives, he can take control. He can take us away from God if we let him. And we know that the earth has been given over to him. But his power is very much limited when it's compared to God. Now, would I want to go up against Satan by myself without God? No. He's a powerful being that was created by God. But in the light of looking at who God is, that God is the creator of not only us, but also all that exists, I think we should be able to understand that, Satan's power is limited. And then that leads us to the next and last part of the lesson here about Satan. How does Satan tempt? And as I said this morning in Bible class, there may be some parallels here with the subject we were talking about this morning. And tonight, being, for those that weren't here in class, the subject we were talking about this morning was, does God test us today? What is testing? And so we started that kind of study and looking at some of that, and we, talked about the idea of temptation and how really there are similarities. I don't believe tempting and testing are the same, but they have similar characteristics to them. It seems, tempting is more trying to get someone to fail, where when you test someone, when God lets us go through tests, it's because he wants us to become stronger and better. Well, from what I gather, as far as spiritual beings, Spiritual beings can see what we're doing when we don't even know they're there. Now, Satan is not omnipresent, where he is here seeing everything that everyone is doing like God does. But the idea of Satan knowing who he's attacking, absolutely. I mean, because that's what the scriptures even tell us, that it's our own desires. And you can't know what someone's desires are unless, you can't attack someone's desires unless you know what they are. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay, now we should finally be, I was using, okay, now. But yes, here we have our slide up here this evening. And how does Satan tempt? He tells the truth all the time, right? He says, hey, listen, I got a story to tell you, and it's 100% fact. Just eat this piece of fruit, and you'll be just like God. Oh, wait, that happened, didn't it? But, I mean, that's the same type of thing, deceit. Do you think that Satan understood what God meant when he told them that they would surely die? I believe he did too. I don't have anything that says 100%, but it sure seems that way, that he understood it more, and he was just deceiving them and trying, because when someone says you're going to surely die, what do you think? Yeah, right now. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means it's going to happen now. But that's what you think, and honestly, that's how he kind of played the game at that point. He enticed her by saying, oh, well, it's not going to happen. And you know what? You wonder for that split second, that first moment when Eve first took that bite and she didn't die, do you think she realized right away because it opened her eyes and she knew? Or do you think maybe there for a second it was, I didn't die? Obviously her eyes were open. Yeah. Yeah, and I think she understood that, but it's just that human nature part of it, that idea of how we think sometimes. How many times have you done something in your life and you thought, oh, see, that was better than I thought it was going to be? Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, was she just trying to bring them to where she had become? But you're right, yeah. They probably didn't understand it completely when they bit into it, but it was the idea that things were starting to open up. There were still lots of things that they were going to learn and try to figure out. Pat? Yeah. Right. Right, yeah, it was more, well, she wants me to do it, so I'm going to. Kind of, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, Eric. Right. So he knew what was going on. Yeah. And in essence, obviously what Jesus says makes sense. He really was. He's the one that convinced the process to get started. So, if you go and you sit in a courtroom and you just help someone get murdered, and you were just the driver. You didn't actually even participate. You may not get life, but you're still going to get accused of being a part of that because you didn't stop it. So we see deceit and lies. We know that Satan is the father of lies. And I think every one of us here knows, too, that, one of the things about lies is they catch up on you. I mean, I've always wondered how someone can be a con artist and live that lifestyle. And every day knowing that I'm cheating and lying to people, and they just keep doing it. But that's things that we have learned ourselves. Satan also comes at our fleshly desires. Things that in our eyes are things that we look at and maybe desire, want, and to the point where, is everything that you desire wrong? Of course not. No, Matter of fact, I can have the same desires as somebody else, and I could act on those desires, but depending upon my situation, maybe I'm, for instance, you think about marriage, and how we see in our world, people just sleep around, they just do, it doesn't matter. But you see that, obviously, you would have a desire like that. Well, the person outside of marriage is not supposed to act upon that desire. And so that just that idea, desires aren't always wrong. It's what we let them do to us. If our desires are so strong that we want it more than God, hey, that could be a slice of pizza. And that could be a sin. And I'll tell you what, I love my pizza. And I know most of my family does too, or at least Liam anyhow. The rest don't really care. But I mean, honestly, you could want pizza so much that you didn't even care about serving God. Obviously that sounds more like a drug, right? But you think about that. Hey, deny Jesus and I'll give you this large pepperoni sausage pizza. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? But what I'm trying to get at is that could be a sin if it was so powerful in our hearts and our minds that we wanted it more than to even be a Christian. I think that's kind of a far-fetched one. I doubt there's anyone going to lose their salvation over pizza. But it's that idea that's what I'm trying to put across, that our fleshly desires aren't necessarily always wrong. Well, deceit, lies, fleshly desires, other people. Does Satan use other people to knock us down? Yeah. Matter of fact, Satan can even use people in the church sometimes to go after, the church and to knock people down. But yeah, other people he will use. How about false wonders, false miracles? How about the people, and I don't hear about this as much anymore, but obviously it seems like maybe the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was a lot more of people that claimed to be faith healers. But you know what? Really all that was people that were charlatans. They weren't healing people. They were giving false hope to a lot of people is what they were doing. But you know what? That's a false wonder. Think about that. Timing or the opportunity, or even a weakness, not being strong enough, not being prepared. That's kind of what we talked a little bit about this morning in class. In the idea that a lot of times we're going through different tests in this life so that when we get down the road somewhere else, something that Satan's going to throw at us, we're going to be ready for. And so that's the kind of some of the differences there. How about the idea of suffering or natural calamity, sickness? I mean, you look at the book of Job, and you see that Satan uses some of those things. So when we look at all of the things that we've looked at through this study, hopefully we come to a better understanding that, don't get me wrong, we don't want to look at Satan and think, oh, he's just a peon, a pushover, no big deal. We got to stay focused and know that anyone that wants to devour you like a roaring lion needs to be focused on. But we need to make sure that it doesn't take our focus. We get so worried about that and forget that God is there to protect us. Kristen? What, with Job? Well, it's not, that's why. I don't, let me rephrase that. I don't think that necessarily we can go, okay, Hurricane Ian down in Florida that just came through was Satan attacking some Christians. I'm not saying this, I should have worded that better. This was ways that God had allowed him in the past. I don't see that happening in the scriptures as much. Now, Satan's going to use nature, though. Now, is it him that sends the storm? No. But there may be times that he's going to use things in the world just as he uses people. It's not a forceful thing where he has power to control it or change it, but he can convince or trick people as well. And I think, he could use some of those things still today, just not in the same sense. I don't see that happening. Sarah, and then Eric. Sure, absolutely. Oh yeah, it makes you focus on other things. Eric, and then I'll get you, Joel.
I think something similar to what she was talking about. I can imagine even natural calamity. Satan always there is to put in people's minds, like, how could a good God let
Right.
this happen?
Yeah.
He's going to say it. But, we're aware of how it works. We know that part of the plan is to have faith in God no matter what.
Yeah.
People see us through.
And to stay focused on that. Yeah. Julianne? Doubt. Even. Right. Right. And work off each other. Pat? Okay. Yeah. Sure, sure. Right. Right. Yeah, and just kind of like what Eric said too about, him using doubt in the middle of the storm. It's the storm's happening. I don't know if I'm going to make it, or the storm's over and my house is gone. And like he said, why would a loving God destroy it? But the thing is, we also got to stop and look. God's not sitting up in his throne, working his tablet in front of him, making sure that he's sending the rain over here and things over here. He set these things in motion to work their own way. Same with us, really. He created us to be good. Obviously, we failed at that mission, and he had to help us out a little bit. But, I mean, that I think the key thing that I hope we get from this whole thing is that Satan is not powerful enough to overcome me if I'm with God. Now, there may be some times that I'm struggling with holding on to my faith, and something needs to be done. Maybe I need a hug. Sometimes that's it. Sometimes someone needs a hug to say, you're okay. You're not in this alone. But we need to realize, we need to not underestimate him, though. Eric and Frank.
If you think about it, what we notice light the most in the darkness.
Sure.
And so when we have natural calamities or sickness or suffering, that's darkness. But it's an opportunity for us to shine.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
we should be, don't go there as far as, why would a good God do that? You say, this is my chance to shine.
Right. Right, yeah, and you really can, Job never says it that way, but you can see that in that story. God says, go ahead and take his animals. it's not going to change who he is. Go ahead and, attempt his health, but don't kill him. It's not going to change who he is. And, so I guess ultimately coming down to the end of this here is these two passages here. Maybe. Can you guys flip me to the next? Oh, how does that happen? No, it was on mouse, but there we go. Yeah, it's Satan. Yeah, he's tempting me right now. Yeah, right. And that's kind of a good way to put it. He's a professional. He put a lot of time into figuring people out. And yes, absolutely. He does not, I don't believe he has that power either to read people's minds or to that, but he can just see us in a different way. Not the same way God can, because he can't look at Brent and me at the same time. Nance? I don't think he knows them like that either. I mean, I'm not saying that it's something that he's talking about. He was saying he's still observing us, and he knows our weaknesses by how we live, but that's different than knowing someone's actual thoughts. Now, I don't know if there's a scripture that I know of, and I will look just to make sure, that specifies either way on that. Yeah, right. That's the all-knowing, yes, but I don't know. Well, I guess the thoughts are. He can be everywhere. There's a different. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Jesus even tells us that. If we tell him to flee, he'll go away. I mean, he fled from Jesus even. He can come back anytime he wants. It's not he left and he's gone for good. Sure. Right, but the difference here, omnipresence doesn't mean that you can be everywhere. Omnipresence means God can sit in heaven. He knows what you're doing. He knows what I'm doing. He knows what Ray's doing. He knows across the world what so-and-so's doing. He sees all of that at once. I don't think so. That's more of a deity type thing as far as the omnipresence thing. And that's, I'm going to go study a little bit more on that because I've never actually looked at it from that perspective. But that idea of the omnipresence is one of the things that's mentioned throughout the scripture that makes God special too. So, and I think Christy was first, and then, go ahead. What about them? What's the question exactly? What power do they have? Oh, that they're all working with him? Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, that would definitely be something that could be a possibility. But, I would say, we oftentimes look at Satan as being this one that stands above the rest. And it's really more so that he's the loudest. I don't know exactly what Satan was when he was created. I don't know if he was an angel like Gabriel. I don't know if he was another type like, a cherubim or something along that line. Or, as it's mentioned, that doesn't mean there isn't other heavenly beings that are created, that we see like kind of snippets throughout the scriptures. So I don't know, and I don't see anywhere in the scriptures where I can tell. I know that a third of the angels fell with him, but that doesn't tell me he was an angel for sure. He was created by God. He was a heavenly being. He was up there. But I don't know. The scriptures don't tell us more than that. Yes. Okay. Yeah, there's definitely, yeah. But you also remember who was Michael. Right. But he was also a creation of God You know, yes, he's a vessel of God at times. He does things for God, stands up for Satan at times. But it would be more on the even kill if we're talking about powers that they have and things that you'd probably say that most likely they're probably on an even kill as far as what they were, especially if they're both created angels, as far as the ability that they can do. But you also got to remember that, you know, as I said in this class, we have to speculate a little bit on Satan because we don't have all of the facts. We can be prepared, we can know him, we can understand him, but God didn't give us the rest. And it's the way he sees that we need it. Yeah, go ahead. And then, mhm. 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 And I think there's two different ways to look at what you just said there, too, as far as the two characters. You have Satan, who it says is walking around all over God's not walking around, he just is there. You know, and that, to me, is the presence of God, first of all. Pat, and then Brent. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, and you know, that's just like us. That's how we should be, too. That's probably a good way to put it. Just, you know, I'm not going to go to where you are. I don't need to. You know, and really, isn't that kind of the impression that Christians should have? Brent, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, remember the chains were reserved for Satan and his angels. You know, so yeah, absolutely. That's one way that I think we give Satan more power than he deserves in this world today. We make him more, well, I guess the best way to put it, like the Greek gods. You know, where you have Hades, who's over that realm, and I think sometimes we look at God and Satan that way when we don't have the right perspective of, you know, who they are as individuals. Yeah, I mean, in the same way, the earth, he put things in. Jeanette? Yeah, I'm still looking up. I will. She was, she asked a question, and I got some information. I just haven't got there yet. There's some more stuff I want to look at. But her question was about the scenario in Job where Satan comes into basically where God is. And, you know, there is some questions about that. You know, how was it that Satan was able to come into the presence of God if he, you know, had sin? That's one of the questions that people will come up with. Yeah. Yeah, I know, and that's why right. But that's also it just to me can come down to the fact that if we don't understand how everything is set up. I mean, because God has come into the presence of human beings before. Or maybe it would be better for us to say we've not his spiritual being, but he's come in forms in the earth to humans, and we're not perfect either. So is there a way that he was able to do that so that he could converse with Satan? I don't know, but I'm when I get an answer, if I can get an answer on that, because that's a tough one. I'm not sure on that. All right, and so let's go ahead. Oh, I already had it there, yeah. And, what is Satan's eternal destiny? Matthew 25, verse 41, Revelation 20, verse 10, the lake of fire. And that's where his destination is. And, the captain is usually supposed to go down with the ship. But he's usually supposed to save everybody else. Satan's more the captain of the ship, and he says, my boat's sinking, you're coming with me. And he's going to do whatever he can to get you to say, hey, no, look, the deck's fine. We're not going down yet. Just stay right here for a little bit longer. And but that's exactly what I think it comes down to. And then ultimately here, the last thing, who is Satan? A created but superhuman, personal, evil world power represented in scriptures as an adversary both of God and of men. He's a real created being. I know some of us would probably like to say, I wish that wasn't true, that he wasn't a real created being. But you stop and you think about, if God looked at Satan when he created him and knew what he was going to become and said, well, I can't do this because he's going to do that, none of us would be here either. Because he would have said the same thing. They're just going to fall from glory. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. As I said, I had some other information in this class, but it's not really. It was more on the history of the satanic religions in America. I mean, it's some neat information if you want to have it, but to me, I didn't think it was absolutely necessary for the class. So, because ultimately, I don't think you need to pledge to, say, the Church of Satan to be a Satanist. I mean, if you are following Satan and living in your life and not with God, then Satan's who you're following. But that was just some of the other information. But next week, we will move into looking at the light side of the heavenly beings, looking at the angels and things. Right? Yeah. And how hard that would be to sit, you know what I mean? It's coming. It hasn't happened yet, but this person's going to stab me in the back. As a human, that would be really hard to sit there and even be nice to the person. It would. This person's going to attack me. It's going to go against me. And yeah, you're right. And the more and more we think about what God has done for us and how God works, to me, I just keep getting more and more amazed. Say that again? Sure, yeah, oh, absolutely. You'll take a lot more when you know something's important, yeah. But still, if I know someone is saying something bad about me, I have a hard time looking at them straight in the face without correcting that issue. You know what I mean? But yeah, the only thing that I could think of as far as a time frame for that would be Maybe he created it when they fell. Because we know that, you know, the lake of fire was created for the devil and his angels. So maybe that, you know, but then again, when did they fall? So you got another question there as far as time goes. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right. Read your Bibles about angels this week and be prepared for next week. And we'll try to go into that just as deeply as we did this and try to get everything in the scriptures we can. Yeah, Cindy. Yes. So you're right. I already announced. Yeah, we will not be doing angels next Sunday. Sorry, that's the 5th Sunday. Nate's going to be speaking in the afternoon. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be moving into the angels lesson. All right. You ready, Chuck? Offer the invitation here this evening for anyone here that has need, whether to be baptized into Christ or maybe you need prayers of encouragement. But if you're here this evening and you need anything, come forward as we stand and